So, Randy Peat, P-E-A-T.
Correct.
Let's just start with a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
Okay. I was born in Chicago in 1948, and my folks moved to Michigan when I was 4. So I grew up in southern Michigan.
Okay.
Working class family. My dad was a mechanic. My mom was a clerical worker. And
How many brothers and sisters?
two brothers, no sisters. The older brother, almost 12 years my senior, and a younger brother, 4 years younger.
Okay.
So and they also served. The older brother was in the Air Force, and my younger brother was in the Army, and I was in the Navy. So we had it covered except for the Coast Guard. But what I found interesting then, and this is back in the 60s, was I had never been more than 150 miles from where I was born.
Okay.
My mother's family was Milwaukee, so Chicago till Milwaukee. We made some of those trips, and then we made some other trips once we moved to Michigan. But other than that, we just didn't have the funds to take, vacations and such. So when I graduated from high school, I graduated a year early. I had skipped a grade. I skipped kindergarten, believe it or not. And so I was one of the younger ones in the class, and that was 1965. And I was advised that, I was going to get drafted. So
how were you advised? You received a draft notice in the mail?
No, I talked to people that knew the people in our county that handled the draft.
Oh, so this was still during the draft boards?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, no lotto, none of that stuff.
Okay.
You get the notice, you go.
And did you have, sorry, I just wanted to clarify one thing. You said your dad was a mechanic. But all three of you boys served.
Yes.
Was there any military in your family history? Was that part of what made you guys?
Well, during the war, World War II, my dad had a deferment because he built wooden hulled minesweepers in Chicago.
Okay.
So he had a critical job. So he served, but in a different way.
Gotcha. Okay. I just didn't know if it was like a family tradition or something.
I would say no.
Okay.
It's just, when it was presented to me, there really wasn't any choice. You're going to go. And I wasn't going to do the conscientious objector or run to Canada, or just wasn't going to do that.
Okay.
So I had never been 150 miles. So the place that I was working at the time, they liked me and I liked working there. And so I told them, I said, well, I'm going to get drafted. When I get the notice, I'll let you know. And they said, well, that's too bad, because we were going to give you a promotion. I was shipping clerk, about a 100-person firm, plastic injections, automotive business we were in. So I said, well, what would I have to do to get that? Because I knew in my mind that when I returned, they had to save the job that I had when I went in. I knew that. So I wanted to go in as a civilian at the highest level I could. So I asked them, I said, what do I need to do? And they said, well, if we knew we had you for a year, 2-week training, we'd train you, put you in the position. So that day, my boss let me off in the afternoon, and I went down and I talked to the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the Marines, talked to everybody. They were all in the same building.
Okay.
Talked to them all. The Navy had a program that if you enlisted for 6 years, that your first year you would stay home in active reserves, but you'd be home. And then the second 2 years would be active duty. And then another year of, active reserves. And then 2 years of inactive reserves for a total commitment of 6. Sign me up. So I enlisted. They took care of the draft thing. I went. I was flown 12,500 miles from where I was born. It's halfway around the world. And little brown people were trying to kill me with guns. And at this point...
That wasn't what they advertised, was it?
No.
That's not the conversation you
And when
had.
I first joined the Navy, I thought, well, I'm so smart, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Join the Navy, see the world.
I'm a genius.
I got this figured out.
Right.
And then when my orders came through, I was assigned to River Assault Squadron 13. And I read that and still remember like I read it yesterday, thinking, what in the hell is that? Didn't take long to find out. But in spite of everything that I have been through, if I had to do it over again, I would. Okay, I'm a strong believer that we have to defend ourselves and we have to protect our freedoms, because if we don't, they'll be gone. So I would do it again, in spite of the Agent Orange, which I have terminal cancer. So I'm, you know,
Oh, Randy.
I'm beyond the point where they can do anything for me from a immunotherapy point of view and all of that. So now every 90 days I get scanned and we just wait for the cancer to come back, and then we take care of it with radiation or removal or whatever, ablation or whatever.
When did you find out?
I've been dealing with this since I was 56. The first cancer was prostate, and we removed my prostate, and then the next cancer was kidney, and we didn't catch that one quick enough, and so it metastasized. So it's, you know, all over. But I've made my peace. I've had a good life. After Vietnam, we started, myself and two other fellows, one of my older brother, we started a business, software development business. And I remember when we started the business, it was within 30 days of when I was discharged. I just felt like I could do anything. You know, after I had been through a year of Vietnam, I just felt like I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof when I was back in.
I have to ask a clarifying question. So you had a deal, a 6-year deal.
Yeah.
They broke the deal immediately.
No, they didn't.
They didn't.
No. They never promised me anything.
Okay. But I'm just wondering, did you do the full 6 years?
Yes.
So you did. Okay. So
Yes,
you
I
did
did.
1 year in Vietnam.
Yes.
Then you came back and you finished out your
2 years.
2 years and then
Yeah.
went inactive.
Right. I did 1 year active, which is weekly meetings, and 12 months out of that, 4 weeks out of that first year, you actually went off to boot camp.
Okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought that as soon as you entered, they sent you to Vietnam.
No.
No, they kept their deal for
They
the 1
kept
year.
their deal,
Okay.
and they trained us well.
Okay. So you started this software development business after you completed 6 years in the Navy.
No, I started it while I was still doing 2 years of inactive reserves.
Okay. How old
But
are you?
any time, then I was 21.
You started a company at 21.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And we took the company public in the 80s, probably around 86. So we were traded on the NASDAQ exchange. And when we sold the company in 2008 as a public company, we had over 500 employees and over 50 million a year in sales, and I was chairman of the board.
What did your software do?
We primarily developed software for county government.
Okay.
So when you think about things that a county would do, taxation, assessment, you know, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ran it successfully for 40 years.
How about that? Well, congratulations,
Well,
man.
thank you.
I mean, really, that's a real achievement.
But I think that part of the reason why I was successful is because of what I went through when I was in country. I just felt like there was nothing I could not do when I got back. I just had that feeling.
You mean that you felt confident, or you mean that you
Confident.
felt bulletproof?
No, I felt confident. Both, I guess. Both. And so it paid off that I had been through that, because there were some hard times in our startup. But we made it.
Yeah. How did you get to Vietnam?
We flew on Braniff.
What do you remember about arriving there? The guy who'd never been more than 150 miles from where he was
Yeah.
born.
What I remember clearly is when we got off the airplane in Saigon, and it was a commercial airline, Braniff. Lots of guys went over on ships and stuff and whatever, but for some reason they flew us. But when I got off the airplane and we were exposed to the environment, I'll bet you within 10 or 15 seconds I started sweating. It was so hot and so humid. You just learn to sleep while you're sweating. It's just, I'll just never forget that.
What month and year did you arrive?
I think we arrived in April of 68.
Okay. Pretty tense time.
That was the height of it all. There was 550,000 other Americans there during that period that I was there. And we were such a unique group because it was the first time the Army and the Navy had gone together and formed a joint unit since the Civil War. So we were cutting new ground all the time, which was interesting. And I look back on what we did and how we did it and all of that, and I'm proud of the way we conducted ourselves and how we handled, tense situations. And we never lost a battle, and we never lost the war. We just quit, the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and you could even argue that we were ahead when we quit.
I would argue that we were. I was there. I mean,
Yeah.
we were.
What's an example of a lesson you learned in Vietnam that helped you later when you were building that software business?
Boy, oh boy.
Or was it more about just personal attributes that you developed?
Well, I remember when I was over there, I got sent a book that was written by Winston Churchill. It was a very short book, and it was called Never Give In. And it was some of the speeches that he gave during World War II. And the never give in part of it just really stuck with me. And I never gave in to this day. I still don't. If I'm intent, I'm there till the end. I don't give up. So that was quite helpful.
Can you talk a little bit about the circumstances of your exposure to Agent Orange?
Yes. I was suspicious of it. I mean, think about it this way. We were in the jungle. I mean, the jungle. And a plane would come over and spray a mist, and the jungle would start to die within a day or so.
Right around you.
Right. That's got to be some pretty powerful stuff. And people think, well, it just all died. Well, that's not really exactly the case. It turned brown. It still stood up there. It still provided cover. It was just brown instead of green, and not as much brown as there was, So I knew in my mind when I saw what it did that, again, even at that young age, I thought, ooh, that's powerful stuff. But there was nothing I could do about that. And we lived on our boats the whole year we were there, 7 of us. And so we drank the water, we washed in the water, cooked in the water. The water was horrible. And even when we would get water that was supposed to be good water, we'd have to mix Kool-Aid with it to make it acceptable. So, powerful stuff. You kill the jungle. It's just amazing.
I've heard stories about guys, using the barrels, the empty Agent Orange barrels to, rig up showers. And I mean,
No doubt. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
so I'm sorry, you said it was April of 68 when you got there.
Yes.
And you were how old?
I was 20 years old. I just turned 20 in February.
Okay.
And then in April we were there.
So you had your 21st birthday.
Had my 21st birthday in Vietnam.
What do you remember about that?
I remember thinking how goofy this all was, how surreal this all was, that here I am in combat, people are shooting at me, I'm shooting at them, and I'm turning 21, and back home I wouldn't be able to buy a beer, It all just seemed, because as it turns out, we were in Dong Tam, which was our main base, even though we weren't there very often, for 2 weeks. And over that 2-week period, we're getting new engines put in. And that's when my birthday was. So for 2 weeks, I was at the enlisted man's club every night, after work, getting blitzed out of my mind because I'm 21 years old and I'm alive.
Wow.
And then the worst of it all happened, kind of after that. The second half of my tour was a lot different than the first half.
How so?
Well, when we got there in April, they had just gotten done with Tet. And Tet, was very, very costly to the Viet Cong, because they were basically, oh, this is all out. We're all in on this one, boys. So they had it all orchestrated, to attack everywhere at the same time.
Yeah.
And so everybody, normally we hardly ever saw the enemy, hardly ever, because they were masters at hiding and camouflage and all that, masters. And so now Tet comes along and they're ordered to, you're going to have to get out, show yourself this time. And so they all do, and we shoot the shit out of them. They make little gains here, little gains there, but we kill the hell out of them. And then I come in April, they're all shot up and licking their wounds and waiting for people to walk down from North Vietnam to fill the guys in the ranks that, So the first, at least as I recall, we had firefights, but very, nothing like the last 6 months.
Things picked up.
Yeah, it picked up considerable.
What can you tell me about your experience with River Squadron 13? What kind of boat you were on? What sort of missions you ran?
Okay, I was from Michigan, as you know. And so when they were deciding assignments on the boats, the personnel person I was talking to said, "You're from Michigan?" I said, "Yep." He says, "You know how to shoot?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Okay, you're a gunner's mate," which was fine with me.
Now, I'm sorry, that scene that you just painted, that took place in Vietnam?
No, that took place at Treasure Island, California.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Before we
All right.
started our schooling.
Yeah, that's what I was so worried about. I thought, oh my God, did they not train him before they sent him over?
Oh, no, we were we went through SEER training. Same thing pilots go through.
Okay.
Yeah, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. We were trained out, we were very well trained.
Okay.
We had no complaints there. I mean, we had, 4 months or so anyway, of counterinsurgency warfare training.
Jeez.
Pretty sophisticated stuff.
That is. So the guy figured since you were from southern Michigan, you probably could, you confirmed that you could shoot.
Yes.
So he said, okay, gunner's mate.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What kind of craft does that put you on?
Okay, what I ended up on was ATC Armored Troop Carrier. We were 56 feet long, about 12 feet wide. I believe we weighed around 56 ton. We had 2 diesel engines, and we could carry about 30 or so fully equipped troops.
Okay.
And on our boat, we had a well deck area, which is where the troops were at. And in the well deck area, out of either side, the port and the starboard side, we had a 50 caliber Browning machine gun. And then next to it, we had two 30 caliber Browning machine guns. So we had 6 machine guns in the well deck where the troops are. Then on the aft end of the boat, we had 3 turrets. And then the port and the starboard turret, we had a 20 millimeter cannon. And in the aft turret, which was the only one that could swing and shoot either way, excuse me, we had a Mark 19 40 millimeter grenade launcher. And as soon as I figured all this out, that this is how we were going to be armed and all that kind of stuff, I said, okay, I'm taking the Mark 19. Because I don't care where they're shooting from, I want to be able to shoot back. So I didn't want to be stuck on one side or the other.
Right.
I wanted to be able to swing my turret around and bring my gun to bear wherever I needed to. So that's how it worked out. Now the gun didn't work out, was we did not get the whole gun. We got the gun, but this ammunition, this is big heavy stuff. So out of the feed box, there was a electric device that fed the ammunition to the gun. Never got that device. So for the first X amount of time I was there, 3 or 4 months, I just had to work with it. And the best I could do was to take around 9 rounds and kind of jury rig them up to let gravity help put the ammunition in. So I could shoot 9 rounds and then have to stop and, do all that over again. And it was just not going to work. So we ended up replacing that gun. And that's quite a story on that. You want to hear that story?
Sure.
Because of all the things I said, we were on this assignment, which really was probably the most scared, concerned I was the whole time I was over there. It was us and one other boat, so 14 Americans, 2 boats. And we were to take fuel, ammunition, whatever, up to not a fire base, but a base that was manned by mercenaries from Cambodia and our special forces. So we had whatever up there, and about 100 of these Cambodian people. And they were in this, compound kind of a thing, fort. And so our job was to take fuel and stuff up there to them. And so it was, one side was Vietnam, there's Cambodia. I mean, that's where we were at. And the base was on the Vietnam side. So that was a real long trip for us to do it. We went all night long, doing that. And I was so concerned because at night, all it would have taken is a sampan coming out from this bush someplace and one hand grenade in that well deck with all that fuel and ammunition. And we would have went up like a whatever. So I was really concerned about that. And we all talked it over. That's where I learned to sleep, standing up, was on those patrols, or missions, I should say, is we all stayed at our general quarters 100% while we were gone. So I managed, and the other guys did too. You're in your mount, and you kind of drape yourself around the gun and, kind of grab a few as best as you can so that immediately you could, pop up and, start shooting.
And how dark is it, Randy?
Oh, it's inky black.
I mean, because you're in the jungle.
Yeah, we're in the jungle, but it's at night. I mean.
Anyway, I've never been there, but I've heard that at night with the canopy and it just blocks out the moon. Like there's no light at all.
Well, that wasn't so true on the rivers.
Okay.
Because you didn't have a canopy.
Okay.
But it was still inky black. And when you're trying to do this maneuver up the rivers at night, you know, you just have one little tiny red light on the back of the boat in front of you, and that's all the light. So it's, you know, tricky driving. I mean, we did it, but yeah, so we decided when we knew that this was going to be our mission for a while to replace the Mark 19. And what I had noted at that point was that the Browning 50 calibers were extremely reliable, and that meant a lot. So I told the boat captain, I said, okay, if we're going to replace it, let's put a 50 in there. So as soon as we got back to the mothership, we talked to the head gunner's mate there, and we took part of the mount off and took it up on the main ship, myself and my assistant gunner's mate, and we worked all night long reforming that mount so we could put a 50 caliber in. Now it's morning, and we're walking off from the pontoons onto the first boat, and we're about 4 or 5 boats rafted out there. And as Benjamin takes the first step, he trips, and the mount goes in the water. So then I thought, oh my God. So I went back up to the ship. Now we're leaving within 15, 30 minutes.
With or without it?
With or without it, we're going. Which I would have just grabbed an M16 or something and shot out the turret with that, but no substitute for a machine gun. So I go back up to the gunner's mate on the ship, and I said, you aren't going to believe this. I said, we deep six that mount. I said, I'll take anything. Do you have anything that I can shoot out that view slit? Because when you get in a firefight, you know, your view slit's about like this. But when you get in a firefight, it feels like it's going like this all the time. So you want to be shooting. So he said, hey, a 20 millimeter will drop right in what's left of the mount. And so he gave me a 20 millimeter in a box made by International Harvester in the 50s. And we took it out and got Cosmily and gave me all the right bolts and told me how to do it. And I said, okay. And so off we went. You know, 30 minutes later, we were underway with this box on our well deck and a handful of bolts and what I can remember you said. And we got it in there. And what we didn't have was an electronic way to fire the gun. You know, there's an electronic trigger. And so I had to fire the gun manually. So if you can picture this, out of the bottom of this machine gun, there's a sear. And there was a way to attach a wire to that sear. And so from this, which is what you release when you want to fire the gun, you release the sear. So from the bottom of the sear, we put a piece of wire on it and ran down about 4 or 5 inches off from the deck and put a stirrup, which we had. So I had to put one foot in that stirrup, and then the other foot I had to bounce around, moving the gun around, and then I was doing pointing and training up here, so I had to bounce around and crank down on that thing. But it worked.
You could have been a helicopter pilot with all that
I'll tell you
coordination.
what, I could do anything, I told you. But it worked.
You could have been Buddy Rich.
It worked. The next time we went back to the ship, I got the electronic
Wow.
firing thing, so I didn't have to dance anymore. And I think I put around 4,000 rounds through that thing while I had it, because you had to keep track of approximately how many rounds so you knew when to change out parts. But yeah, that thing worked good. And the boat captain told me later, he said, you know, when we get in a firefight, I always feel better when I hear your 20 working. And that's true. I think we all did.
You still in touch with any of the guys from your boat?
Not directly, but certainly lots of guys from that I went all through training with, all through Vietnam with, after that.
What do you remember about coming home?
Coming home was a disappointment. They flew us into San Francisco on the way back, again commercial. And so we spent one night in San Francisco, and then the next day we were all, there was about 4 or 5 of us that were together. And the next day everybody was going all over the country to go home. So we had one night in San Francisco. And why we didn't end up in jail is beyond me. Because we were not being treated very well, and it was just a really shit-hook experience. And if it wouldn't have been for a savvy taxi driver that saved our ass and got us out of a place where we surely would have ended up in trouble, I might still be in San Francisco. But with this, we ran across the taxi driver who basically saved us. So that was not good. But I decided to put all that behind me. And the next day, when I did fly home, I was fine. But that was, just didn't expect to be treated like that. By just about everybody, it seemed like. It was just nasty. Just doing my job,
Yeah. Yeah. So you finished out your commitment to the Navy. In the meantime, you started this company.
Right.
How often did you think in those days, was Vietnam a
Didn't
presence
even
in the
talk
front of
about
your
it.
mind?
Didn't even talk about it.
Think about it? Dream about it?
Initially I did. I have PTSD, but never severe or anything like that. But I had reoccurring nightmares, and then I went to the VA and what's up. And so, but when I got back, it was probably 10 years before I even talked about it. I didn't want anybody to know I was there. You wanted to hide your service, for fear of being ridiculed or, whatever.
Or even just stereotyped in some way.
Yeah.
You clearly at some point you made a decision to reconnect with this community and
Yes.
to acknowledge your service and maybe even celebrate it.
Yes.
How long ago was that, and what triggered it?
What triggered it was, is I never was embarrassed or, I was proud of what I did. I just didn't talk about it. And then I heard that there was going to be a reunion in, where was that one I went to? Louisville, Kentucky. And so I knew that a friend of mine.
Well, you were a member of the association then?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think we heard about it, and then I talked to a friend of mine that was also, I served with over there, that I knew lived in Cincinnati, and I talked him into coming, and because I hadn't seen him since we'd been back, and then I made everyone except for the last 2, because I had to deal with some cancer stuff. But association's been good.
Every one except for the 2 that you couldn't make? You've been to every reunion?
Well, I didn't make all of them. I made the first one I heard about, and that was in Louisville.
Yeah, right,
Kentucky.
right. And everyone since then?
And everyone since then. But prior to that, they had, I don't know, a few. North Carolina maybe or something like that.
What do you remember about walking into that facility? I'm assuming it was a hotel ballroom like this one in Louisville.
Yeah.
And seeing all those guys.
It was.
What year was this?
Oh gosh, darn.
What decade?
Yeah. Well, it would have been in the 80s, I would say.
Oh, so not that long.
Yeah. 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 It was a good feeling. It was joy and relief. Kind of, I'm glad to see you. I'm glad we're here. It's kind of all those things mixed together. Yeah.
So I've got one more question, and then I'm just going to offer you the opportunity to talk about anything else that
Okay.
I didn't ask you that you wish I had.
Okay.
My last question for you is, so I did not, I'm an Army brat, but I did not serve in the military.
Uh-huh.
My children are not military brats. They don't know anything about the military. They don't know anything about the Vietnam War. If there was one thing you want my children, who are in their 20s, to understand about Mobile Riverine Force in Vietnam, what would you like them to know about you guys and the work that you did?
That you, whether you realize it or not, you actually live among some very brave people. And that's true today like it was true back then. So sometimes it's different things that brings that out, different occurrences. But for my money, it's on Americans. We will tackle things that other people won't tackle. We will do things that are right. We will do things that sometimes end up being wrong. But, we're going to do things. We're doers. And you live among them. You may not see them, but they are there. As far as the overall military is concerned, I have 2 boys and a girl with my wife, Madeline. And I told all 3 of them, I said, if you're going to go into the military, I'll support that decision, but you have to go in as an officer. I didn't relish being told what to do by somebody that I thought was, dumber than a box of rocks, but I had no choice. And not that that won't happen when you're an officer, but it's less likely. So that's what I told my kids, and none of them decided to go in. I support you and all that, but, go to college, go in as an officer, be a leader. So even though it was fun to go in like I did, because you didn't have any of those pressures. And after I got in there for a while, I wished that I had those pressures, rather than being at the mercy of,
Some idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting thing to have to wrestle with at 21.
Yeah, 20.
20.
I learned a lot in 1 year.
I wasn't thinking about those kinds of questions at 20.
No. And I wouldn't have either, except it was cast upon me. You better be thinking about them. In the service, one of the things that you learn is who's senior. It happens all the time. And if you're the same rank, you're an E3 and I'm an E3. If you got yours before I got mine, you're in charge. So the day you did something mattered. So I knew that we were likely to receive a battlefield promotion of 1 grade, because that historically has been what had happened. So I could have sat back and waited for that. But I thought, nope, I'm going to go ahead and do the correspondence work and, go for it as though no battlefield promotion's coming. So I did all the homework, and it was all correspondence stuff. Some of it I finished when I was actually on the boat in Vietnam and, sent it back. And it came through that I had passed and I was promoted to third class gunner's mate. So that act made me second in command on the boat most of the time. There was a time when we had a coxswain for a month or two that was senior to me, and he would have been second. But otherwise, it was me. 20 years old, second in command of a bristling gunboat in the Mekong Delta. Can you imagine